Hi all, my name is Kit, and this is the sixth video in my Taught Scripting series. So thank you so much to Mike McNeely8016 for this suggestion. Today I'm going to walk you through creating a system for RP jobs that your players can clock in and do to earn money. So the idea behind it is that they would speak to an NPC. That NPC is going to give them a job that they clock in for. So, for instance, they could be a server at a tavern. You could do an infirmary where they're working with patients. There's a couple of different, maybe a guard shift. So specifically in this particular setup, we're going to want them to stay in a particular area for their shift. And we're going to announce it to the server to invite people to come RP with them. And then at the end of their shift, if they've done what they're supposed to, if they've stayed within the area, then they're going to get paid. So, a little bit of housekeeping first. There are two scripts that I'm going to be using in this one that I'm not showing you how to build because they're coming from other places. So the first one is, I've talked about this one before, so if you've done other videos with me, you might have already imported this, but the cooldown script that was created by Noms in the Taught Discord, we're going to be using that. So I will link that in the description of the video. If you haven't already imported it, you will need to do that before we get started. Second one is optional. It is, and if you've watched the previous video, you'll know what it is. It is the webhook script for posting to Discord from the node. So that one we are going to be using in this to, when somebody clocks in, we also want to post on the server Discord to say, that this person is working, because sometimes that brings in people who are not currently logged into the server but want to come check it out in RP. So that's optional. You do not have to do that piece, but if you do want to do that piece, just make sure you go back to the previous video for instructions on setting that up. So the first thing we want to do, as you can see, I'm in the Orc City in my server, and I want to have this Orc Tavern keep hire players to just be servers. So the first thing that we need to do is put a zone and create that they have to stay within. So I already kind of figured out where the center of my area is here and how big it needs to be. You might need to experiment to figure that out for yours. Make sure that you do check enabled. And then I'm just going to name mine Orc Tavern. Obviously give it a descriptive name so you'll know what it is. And that's all we need to do with the zone for now. And then we're going to start on our scripting. So we're actually going to build this maybe a little backwards. Instead of starting with the interaction with the NPC, we're going to first build a repeating script which is going to run once they clock in, and basically every X amount of time it's going to check and make sure that the player is still in the zone where they need to be. So I'm going to call this work shift checker. And the very first thing that I'm going to have it do maybe is going to feel a little unnecessary. And the reason that I do this, ideally they should never trigger this script unless they clock in and have kind of engaged the cooldown for how long this shift is. But just to make sure, because if somehow this got engaged and something wasn't set up right, it could be an endless loop. So I'm going to put in a little piece at the beginning to make sure that we don't get in an endless loop. So what we're going to do is get string var. So when we set up our cooldown later, the cooldown script actually just uses string vars to store the cooldown in. So what we want to do is check if this string var even exists. Because if it doesn't exist, we need to get out of here. We don't want to start it because we'll be in that endless loop. So I'm going to call my cooldown, let's just call it work shift. That's easy to remember. We don't need to return a value on this one because we don't actually care for this one whether, like, what it says. We just want to know whether it exists at all. So if it failed, it will just exit this script. But if it's there, then okay, things are set up correctly and we're going to move forward. So first thing we're going to have to do is check and see if it is currently in cooldown. And so we're going to go to the script, the cooldown script by noms. And we're going to use the same cooldown UID that we just checked for in the tags. So work shift. We don't need to set any of this because we're not setting the cooldown, we're just finding out whether it's still active. So we'll create a variable for storing that. So basically, if it is on cooldown, that means that they're still on shift. Their shift has not ended. So we're going to put a branch to determine whether that is true or not. And I'm actually going to follow the false branch first because it's shorter. So if it is not in cooldown, then great, their shift ended. It's actually time to pay them. So what I'm going to do to get them paid, I'm going to put a tag on the player, which then the next time they talk to the NPC will recognize that tag and get them their money. So we're going to add a tag. And as always, name it something you'll remember. I'm going to name it something silly. So if it's time for them to get paid, they should have the I want money tag. But if they're still on shift, then what we want to do is make sure that they are still in the zone, because if they leave the zone, deal's off. They are done, they don't get paid. So the first thing that we need to do is just see, we need to get the list of the players who are in the zone. So get players in box zone. Theoretically, you could use a sphere, but I think since this is probably the kind of thing that's usually going to be inside a building, boxes probably make more sense. And orc tavern is the one we just created. Make a variable to store the players who are in the tavern. And then the next thing we need to do is get the player context for the current player. Because what we want to do is check and see if they are in the list, but before we can check that, we need to know who they are. So we're going to drop that into a variable that's just player. And then we are going to use this list contain value node just to confirm whether or not they are one of the players inside the tavern. So if they are inside the tavern, we're all good. We're going to set a timer to basically just run the script again and check these things again. But once again, I'm going to go down the false leg because that is shorter. So if they're okay, so they're in cooldown, so that means they're still on shift. Their shift hasn't ended, but they are not in the zone. They have left the tavern, which means that they are not going to get paid. So once again, I'm just going to do that with a tag, an add tag. And the tag that I'm going to give them this time is bad worker. So again, that will be based on next time they talk to the NPC will either see an I want money and say okay and give them their money, or get the bad worker tag, and you can handle that however you want. I'm going to have my NPC scold them a little bit. So, however, if it's true that they are in the zone, they're doing what they need to be, great. So then we're going to set that timer. So first things, I have talked about timers in a previous video, but I'm going to review a little just in case you haven't seen that one. So what we need to do for timers is basically get the current time and then add how much time we want the timer to go for to that current time. So the way that we get the current time is the get date node, because it gets both date and time. And we want to use the server local date for that. So we'll just call this current time. And then to add our time to the current time, we're going to use an add duration node. And you can decide how often you want to check. For the purposes of this, I'm going to say every 5 minutes. You might want to do a shorter time to check, but for me, I feel like they're not going to get far in 5 minutes, so if we wait 5 minutes between checks, I don't think that's a big deal, but you can decide for your server what makes sense. So let's say 5 minutes is added to our current time. And then we're going to store that in a variable that we call next fire time. So we just know this is the next time that the script is going to fire. And then we're going to set our timer. So again, mentioned this in a previous video, but if you didn't see that, I'm going to repeat it. Don't select any of your variables until you've selected your script, because it does reset all the variables and you don't want to have to do it twice. So we're just going to, our current script that we're in is what we want to select here, the work shift checker, because we want to rerun this same script. Date should be next fire time, and then we can call this whatever we want. Just for it to be easy, I'm going to say work shift timer is what we'll call it. So this is our repeating script. We're basically, again, we're going to check and see if they have a cooldown at all, just to make sure we don't get stuck in an endless loop. Then if they do have that cooldown, we're going to check whether it is still in cooldown or whether the time has already passed. We are going to either, if the time has passed and they've gotten to this point, we know that they haven't left the zone because this has been checking. So if they get to that point, they get paid. If not, we're going to check if they're still in the zone, and then either assign them a bad worker tag if they're out of it, or continue, set our timer, and wait to rerun. So let's build that. Okay, so now that we have our repeating script, the next step is to create the script that actually will go on the NPC. So for my server, I usually call the script the name of the NPC, which in this case, Teddy is our orc bartender. Not a very orcish name, but he's got a whole story behind it. So actually, I'm going to real quick create an NPC name variable, because I'm lazy and I don't like to type it 20 million times. There we go. So the very first thing that we're going to do is just have the NPC greet the player with a basic send dialogue. Of course, Teddy is, I would say, not the most friendly, so we're just going to Now you could mention something in this initial dialogue about the job. The reason that I'm not doing that is because I want some things to be conditional on whether they have already worked a shift, whether they're in the middle of a shift, whatnot, and that I believe is easier to do with relation to the answers, the player answers, than it is for the NPC dialogue, so that's why I'm choosing to do it this way. So we'll create our answers group, and I'm going to leave a lot of space because I just want to create the answers that could possibly exist first, and then we'll come back and do all the conditional stuff. So I think I'm going to do these a little bit. Once again, we're kind of working backwards, and the reason is because if we don't want them to start another shift until they've already either been paid for their previous shift, or if they walked out, then scolded for walking out. So we actually are going to put the answers for those two paths first and check that logic first before we get down to the option of working. So I'm just going to say if they're ready to be paid, we'll just say I've finished my shift. And I'm actually going to copy this answer twice because I think, at least the way I want to handle it, that's also what they're going to say if they walked out, but they're just going to get a different response from Teddy. So I'm going to put that on here twice. And then I also want to add an answer for, hey, I want to work. So let's say any work going. And then one more, I always like to leave them, oh, don't paste that there. I always like to give them an option to just leave the dialogue without further interaction. So let's add that in here. And we'll go ahead and do the closed dialogue because that's a short path. And then we're just going to make sure we do our send answer group before we forget. Okay, so now we've got our answers and we have to determine which of these answers is going to show. So the first one is only going to show if they have the tag that we created for paying them, which was I want money. So if they have that tag, then we're going to give this answer. If they don't have that tag, we're going to move on to the next check. So I'm actually just going to copy this because the next check is also based on a tag, which is that bad worker tag. So if they have the bad worker tag, we're going to go to this answer. If not, we're going to continue on down. So then the next piece that we want to check is, are they still in cooldown? Meaning, are they still on shift? So we're going to grab that check cooldown script again. And our cooldown UID is still work shift. And we need to once again create this is on cooldown Boolean variable. And I'm actually going to give a little more space because I need room to stick a branch in here. So if they are still in cooldown, I actually don't want to give them any of the answers. I only want to give them the option to leave because they are not done with their shift, so they just need to go back to their shift. But if they're not in cooldown, then they are allowed to start a new shift. So we'll give them this answer option. And then we also from here have to connect up our thens on these answers. So if you have this answer, then you can't have any of the other answers except leave. Same with both of these. So they all route into leave. You can only have one of these three options. Alright, so first option, they have successfully finished the shift and they get paid. So we're going to first just give them their payment with an add item node. And you're going to use whatever coinage you use on your server. On mine, it's the mint coins, but you might use the default Conan coins or something else entirely. So you just grab your item that is your coinage and your quantity. I said I'd pay out 2 silver, whatever it is that you're paying. Drop that in there. And then we're going to do some cleanup on our tags and things. So first of all, we do not want them to keep collecting this money. They've already been paid. So we need to remove the tag that says they should be paid. And also, just for keeping things tidy, and again, probably not necessary, but I like to clean up just in case of that endless loop. I don't want to ever mistakenly get into that. I'm also going to get rid of the string variable that was holding our cooldown. And then we'd like Teddy to in some way acknowledge them, so we'll just pop a send dialog in here. And maybe say, like, so you did. Here's your money. And then we're just going to give them a simple exit to this conversation. So it's just going to be a simple pause answer. And then a close dialog. Okay. So then next option is they say they finished their shift, but they didn't actually stay in the area the whole time. In which case, what I think I want is I want Teddy to give them a little bit of a hard time. So we're going to send dialog and we're going to remove that tag because, at least for my server, I do want to give them another chance. They didn't do what they were supposed to, but they can come back and restart their shift if they want to and actually do it properly this time. So we'll take that bad worker tag off so that they can come back. And then once again, we're going to give them this just easy way to exit the conversation. And then last but certainly not least is the actual any work going, which what we're going to do with that is have the NPC explain to them what the requirements are of the work and then give them an option like, are you still interested, and a yes or no, after which we'll actually start the mechanics to clock in. So I'm going to move this down a little bit to give ourselves some space. So we're going to start with a send dialog. And I like to explain things both in character from the NPC and with a little italics out of character note about the mechanics. So I'm going to do that. And I like to spell out how much time it is, what they will get paid, and that they can't leave the area. Okay. Then I also want to add the question to make sure that that works for them. You still interested? And then we're going to give them an answers group to say yes or no. And once again, we're going to keep reusing this simple pause answer. So if they say no, they're not interested, then we're just going to, oh, actually, sorry, we don't need the simple pause answer. We need to go straight to close dialogue because they already clicked the answer. But, all right, so we are here and they say, actually, yeah, I'm interested. So what we're going to do is clock them in and get them going. So first of all, we're going to set this cooldown timer that determines how long their shift is. So for that, we're going to run the subscript for the check cooldown, because as well as checking, this also can set your cooldowns. So we're going to call it work shift. I'm going to set it for 1 hour. I'm going to check the should activate because that's what sets it. And then we also want to announce that they're working to the server. So I'm going to go ahead and put in 3 different ways of announcing. Probably announcing it 3 ways is overkill. You might want to pick 1 or 2 of them, but I'm going to show you the 3 ways and you can decide what you'd like to do. So the first way I'm going to show you is actually, I mentioned it earlier from the previous video, which is posting to Discord that someone is looking for RP. So to that, we're going to use the subscript that we created in the previous video, which would be this Discord webhook. And again, we covered these in the previous video, but short version is avatar URL would be the icon they're posting with. That does need to be a web address URL. Bot name is the name of the character posting, and then message content is your content formatted for Discord. So I'm going to try to do this from memory and see if this avatar is correct. Hopefully so. And then our bot name is Teddy. And I'm going to do a thing I actually mentioned in the last video but did not show, which is I want a pipe character in the bot's name. So how I'm going to do that is use the HTML for pipe, which is ampersand, the word pipe, and then a semicolon. And we'll say orc bartender at Red Skull Rock is our orc city. So what that is actually going to look like when it comes into Discord, just cut this out for a second here. This is what it will display as in Discord, but we use that pipe so that it doesn't get confused when it's processing for Discord. So since I mentioned that but didn't show it, I just wanted to pop it in here. And then our message content can be, so I actually, let's pause here. I'm going to pull this out. Because I want the character name in this message content, we do need to actually make it a variable because I don't believe that you can put variables in here the way that I've set it up. So let's add a format text node. And we'll go ahead and put our text that's going to go through all of our notifications. So let's say character name is serving drinks, the tavern in Red Skull Rock, because I don't think this tavern has a name yet, so we're just gonna say the one in Orc City. And let's save that as announcement. And we'll drop that right in here. So then maybe we also want it to display in global chat. So let's use a send message node. And you could put, maybe you could put the name of the NPC here. You could say Teddy is saying this. I prefer it just to appear without a name, so I'm going to leave that alone. And once again, we're going to use our announcement for our message that will be posted. So that will go in the global chat. And then one last way that you might want to display the announcement is as a HUD notification. So once again, we'll drop that announcement in there. So we've got 3 different ways to announce it. Like I said, pick and choose which ones work for your server. And then we also have to get our repeating script started. So we're going to run subscript and pick our repeating work shift checker here. And I'm actually going to say start as new script because we don't really want this Teddy script to sort of stay open while we're running that repeater. We don't need it. So I'm going to say run as start as new script. And then last but not least, we need to have Teddy acknowledge that they just clocked in or what they just said and give them an option to close out of the dialogue. So we'll do another send dialogue for Teddy. And we'll just say, great, get to work then. And then once again, I'm going to grab this simple pause answer and close dialogue, which is incredibly useful to have. We're just going to use it for everything. So then that gives them the ability to leave that dialogue, and now they are on shift. There's actually one more thing that I do want to show you here that we use on my server. It is, again, optional, what makes sense for you and your players, but on this path of any work going, on my server, because the purpose of these RP jobs is to encourage RP, I don't want them to be able to start this RP job, clock in, if there's nobody else on the server. If they're the only player currently on the server, like if it's the middle of the night and nobody else is on, that for me kind of defeats the point of why I offer these RP jobs. So I'm actually going to add in a piece and show you how to do that check for is anybody else on the server. And if not, then I'm going to just have Teddy say like, nah, it's dead. I don't really need any help right now. So to do that, we're going to kind of move this all out because that will affect this whole section here. So I'm going to scoot this out here a bit so we have some room to add our check. So the way that we're going to check this is list all players, and that's going to give us a list of who's online. So let's call that variable players online. And then we basically want to count how many people are in the list. And we're going to do that with a getListLength. And let's call this variable num of players. And then lastly, we want to do a math branch to check whether that number is more than 1, because if it's 1, that means the person that the NPC is talking to is the only player on the server. So we're just going to do a math branch for whether num of players is greater than 1. And I didn't move these enough, so let me zoom out here to scoot these a little bit further. So if it is greater than 1, then we can go ahead into our whole path. If not, and they're the only player on the server, I'm going to pull it all the way down here so we're not conflicting. Then maybe we want to say something along the lines of and I'm also once again going to add in a little out of character comment because I don't want players to get frustrated if they're like, hey, sometimes I go to clock in and it won't let me and they don't know why. So I just want to explain out of character that you can only do RP jobs when there are other players on the server to RP with. And then maybe just no one else is currently online. And then you guessed it, we're going to give that simple pause answer and close dialogue to get them out of the dialogue. So like I said, that's optional if you want to let people clock in for RP even though there's no one on the server. And you might want to, especially if you are using those Discord webhooks, because you might say, well, maybe nobody's on right now, but somebody might see the Discord message and hop on to RP. So that's up to you. It is optional, but you can add that in there if you don't want people to do that when nobody else is on. Now, of course, the problem with this is I am currently the only person on my server, so I'm not going to be able to get into the other options. So I'm actually going to show you this first, and then I'm going to go back into the script and take that out so that you can see the other options. I am also going to turn off the admin flags because when I'm not actively using them, they annoy me. So let's go ahead and set up our puppet here. On interact, we're going to run script. And it's going to be the Teddy script. Alright, so when I talk to Teddy, oops, okay. Let me clear off my information here. It looks like I left some tags on from my previous tests, so. And you can, you may know this already, but you can, as an admin, you can add and remove tags. You can alter the variables that you have on a player by going to this player's menu and clicking on the person. So as you see, I was testing some stuff and I have the bad worker, so I'm going to take that off for the moment. And I probably also have my cooldown. Oh no, I did delete the cooldown. So, okay, let's get out of here. So now he should give me the correct options. Yeah, so now we have the any work going. And if I ask that, he says, nah, place is dead, I got it handled. So I'm going to pop back into that script and turn that off. So now when I say this, he should tell me more about the job. Great, so that's working well. So I can go ahead and go on shift, and if I do that, you're going to see some notifications in some different places. So you see it just popped up in the HUD, and you can see it here in global chat, and then it will also go to my Discord server. Okay, so now that you have seen the beginning of the interaction, I'm going to mess with tags a little bit and timing so that you can see the dialogue for when you get paid and the dialogue for when you have left the zone. So we're going to go back into that sudo admin panel. We're going to go back into players, and I'm just going to alter my tags somewhat. So first things first, I'm going to change this so that I'm no longer on shift. So let's just change this right here in the middle is the hours. So let's make that 16 instead of 17. So now it's been an hour. And then we're also going to add the tag I want money to say, okay, I've completed what I need to do and now we're going to be paid. So we'll manipulate that so we get the results we want. Now I'm going to talk to Teddy again, and I now have the option for I've finished my shift, and you kind of have to watch, there's things going on multiple places, but once I click this on the right side, you should see it pop up that I'm going to get my silver mint. So you see that pop up on the right side, and then it says, so you did, here's your coin. Great. So that's what it looks like if we do it that way. And I am going to talk to him again to start a new shift so that I can run the other simulation. Okay, so now we're going to come back and do the version of I stepped out, I'm a bad worker. So I'm going to once again change it so the cooldown has already passed. And then we're going to add the bad worker tag. And so now when I talk to Teddy, once again, I've finished my shift, but hopefully we should get, yep, so I told you I don't pay slackers. So yeah, that's pretty much what it is to create the RP jobs. There's of course more complication that you can introduce, like for instance on my server I actually have added some items to limit that they can only take 2 shifts per day because I don't want someone continually spamming that and spamming the Discord if people aren't engaging. So they can only take 2 shifts per day, but that seemed a little outside of the scope of the video to really drill down into all that. So, and of course you can have different NPCs with different dialogue. You can give them some other options that aren't just about jobs, but I just wanted to focus in on this one piece. And I also wanted to mention Mike McNeely 8016 did also ask about doing an announcer for RP where you would speak to the NPC and they would just sort of announce that. I'm not going to do that as a separate video because I feel like the skills to do that were shown in here. You would just, again, do your dialogue with the NPC, and when you say, you want to, however you want to word that, basically you say, yeah, I want to meet people or whatever, and then the NPC does the, again, we can do send message to send to the global chat, or the local chat, depending on how you want to do it. It could be a shout in the local chat. We can use the subscript that we created to send a message out to a Discord channel, and we can use HUD notifications. So that would work pretty much the same way as how we set up those notifications. And that's pretty much it for this one.